Right now, businesses looking to combat President Trump's tariffs are starting to consider passing their higher costs along to their customers. There's new KPMG numbers saying that over the next 6 months, nearly half of U.S. businesses will raise prices, by up to 5%. Another 29% say they're hiking costs anywhere from 6 to 15%. Brandon Daniels knows how all this comes together, CEO at Exiger, which is a firm that does work on supply chains using artificial intelligence. Welcome, Brandon, as always. What about this? We've been waiting on timing, see how everything kind of works out with the president's tariffs and what the effect is on prices. What would you say?
I think, and it's great to see you, Connell. Thank you for having me on. In terms of pricing, what we're seeing is that the supply chain has largely been absorbing the tariffs that have been imputed thus far, because a lot of the tariffs have been on the components, the pieces that are actually going into the upstream goods. You know, these tariffs have been largely felt in areas of critical infrastructure that need steel and aluminum, in auto that need those same components and parts. And what we're seeing is that those price shocks are being absorbed by the companies.
Right.
The question is that going to be maintained? And that depends on the amount of investment we see coming into the United States, building infrastructure and diluting the cost, because it's both a demand pull and a supply push.
Wait, a commitment to invest or actual, because all that takes a while to kind of work its way through the system, building plants and that kind of thing.
It's both a commitment to invest, because that creates the pull for capital. Like we saw this in a few other areas, like the Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, where huge volumes of private capital came into industries to start the actual investments, to start the breaking ground of these major infrastructure improvements. When you take things like the $1 trillion in AI infrastructure that NVIDIA and OpenAI announced last week, when you take things like the infrastructure enhancements, when you talk about major manufacturing uplifts, that starts to create a demand pull that forces an expansion in the market. It actually it creates a lot more dollars in the market. And it could create a situation in which those infrastructure projects, those demands are, for a short period of time, seeing price hikes, but then as that infrastructure ramps, it dilutes and goes back down.
Okay. Second thing I wanted to ask you about, the president made the announcement the other day on prescription drug prices and this deal with Pfizer for discounted prices. Says there's going to be more to come like it. He's calling it, of course, TrumpRX. Prices to be set at the most favored nation rate or the lowest price paid by other developed countries. And he says it will benefit about 27 million uninsured Americans. I guess, what did you think of this and the way they're structuring this? Is someone like you in private business comfortable with the government involvement in all of this?
Well, I mean, the government actually already negotiates prices. S negotiates prices. They negotiate prices with GPOs. There are a lot of problems with those GPOs and how they specifically have been negotiating things like generics. It has forced lower quality APIs from China to get into our supply chains and create sort of intractable problems in our pharmaceutical supply chains overall. But just coming back to your question, look, I think that this is an interesting tact. I did not expect that the first place that potential tariffs and price negotiations would start to happen is in those specialty pharmaceuticals. I thought it would be, in some of the generics that are more widely pervasive, more used, and that it would actually go to forcing people to reshore those generics, because that's where we're most vulnerable and fragile. But the fact that they're doing it in specialty pharmaceuticals makes sense, because those are the most expensive ones. Those are the ones where, the intellectual property is still the premium. And so I think that, one, this is going to lower drug costs substantially, especially for those newer, more cutting edge pharmaceuticals especially in cancer patients and heart disease patients and patients, some of these more significant ailments. And I hope that this now starts to transcend
Right.
into change and into, movement on the generic side, where we just have incredible dependencies on foreign adversaries.
Okay, we'll watch for that. Always appreciate your time, Brandon. Brandon Daniels from Exiger. See, get out.